Data is everywhere. We live in a world that is increasingly defined by data. So I decided to ask ChatGPT what being data-driven means. And it says that being data-driven refers to the approach of making decisions, developing strategies, and conducting operations based on data and evidence instead of solely relying on our intuitions. As the significance of data continues to escalate, business leaders worldwide rely on data to monitor and track company performance. But are we data-driven when it comes to reflecting on our own life experiences? We often hear the advice to trust our gut, but in times of failure, it's data that offers us a rational and calculated path forward that acts as a guiding light during challenging times. This is the last year of my 20s, and today I will be sharing 3 pivotal moments in the past 10 years of my life where I relied on data to drive my decision-making when I was kicked out of university, almost filing for bankruptcy, and healing a broken heart. My first story is about when I was in first year studying for an arts degree. I was notified that I would be withdrawn from my program with a 0.8 GPA on a 4.33 scale. I was faced with a decision to make. Should I take my chances and apply to a new program, which at that time, chances were nearly impossible with the poor grades I had, or should I simply accept that I'm a high school graduate and look for a job? Being kicked out was a painful and shameful experience. My heart tells me it's easier to accept the outcome and find a job than to go through the application process, reapply to a new program, and only to find out I may get rejected. But I asked myself, what led to this point, and how can I change the trajectory of my life? I uncovered a path guided by logic and calculated my understanding of what had gone wrong and what needed to change. Now let's examine the number of data incidents over the period of interest. The dreadful 3-hour commute to school daily, the lack of studying time, barely feeling motivated, and the guilt of procrastination all contributed to my poor grades. After doing so poorly on tests and assignments, I ended up failing the exact same course, not once, but 3 times in a row. I had no direction after being kicked out. I felt ashamed that I was no longer part of a university that I once worked so hard to get into. To understand myself better objectively, I created a system that examined these factors from a third-person perspective. Now you see, the benefit of being data-driven is you can remove a certain degree of mental bias. I pulled data from test grades and analyzed my growth throughout the series of failed exams. I took all the personality tests out there on the internet so that I could be more self-aware of my strengths and weaknesses. And what I realized is I loved exactly what I did just now. Solving problems, business problems to be specific. So once I was able to straighten my logic, I focused on execution. I enrolled in additional courses outside of my program to show the university that I was serious about making a change. I reached out to professors, to program advisors, and industry professionals, asking them for their recommendation letters to strengthen my application. I did everything that I could to prove that I deserved a second chance. Looking back, being data-driven means executing logic and using historical data to make informed decisions instead of solely relying on my emotions and past experiences. So armed with my data-driven mindset, I made the decision to pursue a business degree. And as for the happily ever part of my story, from a 0.8 GPA to being kicked out, I ended up graduating from one of Canada's top business schools. And this year, I'm also expected to graduate with my MBA. My second story is about my career. While in business school, I co-founded Canada's first Asian food delivery app. It was a bootstrap startup that brought in over $100 million in revenue. When the pandemic hit, we faced significant losses and went from comfortably profitable to millions of dollars in debt and on the verge of bankruptcy. Most people would have imagined food delivery companies making quite a profit at a time like this. I would have assumed so too, but unfortunately, we struggled to survive when our competitors went crazy burning venture capital money to fight for a piece of the market share, when social distancing and lockdowns had people favor the convenience of delivery and mobile pickups. For a period of time, that meant for every order delivered, we suffered a $20 loss so that we could even keep at par with what our competitors were burning. As a bootstrap startup, we faced many financial challenges. We couldn't afford the office rent, our checks kept bouncing, and we wore jackets in the office so that we could save on heating bills during Canadian winters. Still, we had to let go a big part of our tech team as we couldn't support payroll. It would have been much easier to just stop operations and file for bankruptcy. Even our bank advisor advised against taking out larger loans as it was just too risky. But this is what the data says. To find a solution, I conducted an exercise that gathered quantitative data and identified patterns and correlations. First, let's examine the business model, which involves three primary factors: restaurant partners, delivery drivers, and the customers. The leading cause of our financial loss are the customers, as we couldn't keep up with the marketing incentives. We noticed from an industry standpoint that our competitors were also struggling, including Foodora, that made the difficult decision to close operations in just 5 months of the pandemic. And to this day, Uber Eats has never made a profit. However, if we were to eliminate the customers, there would be no incoming orders for the restaurants or the drivers. But for my startup to survive, I had to change our business model to ensure that we could balance our expenses and sales while keeping an eye on cash flow. By closely monitoring real-time data and comparing performance metrics week over week, I looked for patterns and tied every decision back to data. We decided to pivot from a marketplace platform to a simpler business-to-business model as we shifted our focus to last-mile delivery. Local business owners, not limited to just restaurants, but retailers and e-commerce shops can use our network of delivery drivers and the technology that we've built to offer their customers with next-day delivery. With a data-driven change in strategy and direction, my startup is now operating across 24 cities in Canada and doing millions of deliveries to date. As I reflect on my journey, this is where data, reason, and resilience unite and empower us with a better perspective of our choices. Now that we have witnessed the impact of data-driven decision-making in my education and career, can we approach our emotional experiences with the same mindset? My last story today is about love. Popular culture often romanticizes the idea of love at first sight. Love is blind. Love just happens, and you can't help who you fall in love with. I once fell in love with someone that felt so right, but at the same time, data proved otherwise. Looking back on the relationship, I realized I tend to fall for the same type of person repeatedly. And what I've noticed is this: when people get their hearts broken from a failed relationship and have a challenging time recovering, it's because they rely on their emotions that will time and time again take them down the wrong path. Understanding the why behind the breakup is so important for me to move on, instead of simply relying on my gut instincts that mystifies the reason why. If I had let my emotions run its course, I would start doubting myself and wonder if we fell out of love because I wasn't tall enough or smart enough or extroverted enough. But really, the deal breaker was that I wanted to focus on my career while he wanted to grow a family. The breakup happened due to a misalignment of priorities. By misalignment of priorities in life, and by quantifying my emotions and looking for patterns, I found that I could use data to predict the success rates of my relationships early on. Don't let your unconscious mind take you down a path that you know will make you feel worse. Measure factors such as how quickly someone replies to texts, how many promises they make and keep, what their bad habits are, and the amount of quality time they dedicate to you. These data points can all be used to measure relationship success. It's fine that he sees you only once a month and takes you out to a $1.50 Costco hot dog date, but you know data tells you otherwise when he spends $300 treating buddies on a night out. Quantify your emotions and look for patterns, and comparing data to predict your success rate. While it may be challenging to predict who your true love would be, data can help you know where to look. And would that suggest that many of us are dating all wrong? With these data insights, we can heal through breakups, grow, and be ready at the next shot at love or strengthen our current relationships. These were the pivotal moments of my 20s, where data-driven decision-making transformed my failures into not-so-bad outcomes. From getting expelled from school to steering my startup through the pandemic and decoding the complexities of love. I share how relying on data became my guiding compass. Data is more than just numbers and charts. It's the raw materials of your life. It's the facts, the experiences, the observations that shape your existence. Being data-driven is uncovering a path guided by logic and calculating your understanding of what had gone wrong and what needed to change. It's to gather quantitative data and to find patterns and correlations. To be data-driven means to anticipate potential outcomes and formulate execution plans. I invite you to start your journey of data-driven self-reflection and let data be your guide. Thank you.